Scorpio. There was a small moment recently, something so subtle you almost moved past it without noticing. A quiet shift in your awareness, like a thought that didn't fully form but stayed with you longer than usual. Scorpio, it felt different, as if something was trying to reach you before you even understood what it was. This April carries that same kind of undercurrent, not loud, not dramatic, but present in a way that feels hard to explain. It shows up in brief pauses, in the way your attention lingers on certain ideas, in the sense that something of value is slowly making its way toward you. And what makes this even more interesting is where it seems to be coming from. Not from the places you've been watching, not from the paths you've been trying to control. It feels like it's arriving from a direction you didn't expect, almost like someone or something outside your usual field of awareness is now part of your story. Have you ever experienced that before? Receiving something meaningful from a source you didn't even consider? Not necessarily dramatic, but enough to make you stop and think, why now? And why like this? That kind of moment tends to stay with you because it touches something deeper than logic. Your intuition might already be picking up on this. Scorpio energy has a way of sensing movement before it becomes visible, like feeling the shift in air before the wind actually arrives. And right now, there's a quiet signal moving through your space, asking for your attention in the smallest ways. April, in its own way, opens certain doors gently. It doesn't push, it doesn't rush, but it creates a flow where things that once felt distant begin to come closer. Not all at once, not in a way that overwhelms you, but steadily, almost as if something has been aligning behind the scenes for longer than you realized. And maybe that's the part worth sitting with for a moment. The idea that what's approaching you didn't just appear out of nowhere. It carries weight, timing, and a certain intention that feels both personal and strangely unfamiliar at the same time. If something unexpected has been on your mind lately, you can acknowledge it below. I feel something coming. There's a quiet realization beginning to take shape here, one that doesn't arrive all at once, but unfolds in layers. You start to see that what's moving toward you now didn't begin today, or even recently. It carries a history, something that traces back to moments you barely paused to remember. Think about the times you showed up without expecting anything in return, the small decisions that felt almost invisible at the time. Those moments didn't disappear. They continued moving, connecting, building something beyond your immediate view. And now, there's a sense that this movement is circling back, finding its way toward you in a form you can finally recognize. What's interesting is how little we track what we actually create. You move through life making choices, offering time, energy, attention, and rarely do you follow where those threads go. Yet those threads remain active, weaving through situations, people, and timing until they form something that can return. This is where the shift begins to feel real. It's no longer just a vague sense of something coming, it becomes a pattern you can almost see. A realization that what's approaching you carries weight because it has been in motion for longer than you realized. And what returns doesn't always look the way it started. Sometimes it comes back as money, sometimes as an opportunity, sometimes as unexpected support at the exact moment you need it. The form changes, but the essence stays connected to what you once gave. There's a certain calm that comes with seeing this clearly. It removes the feeling of randomness and replaces it with a quiet understanding that things have their own timing, their own way of completing a cycle. What's arriving now feels less like coincidence and more like a continuation of something already set in motion. You might even begin to notice small confirmations, subtle alignments that make you pause for a second longer than usual. Moments where something clicks internally, where the present starts to make sense in the context of your past. And that recognition shifts the way you receive what's coming next. Because once you see the connection, even faintly, you relate to the moment differently. It's no longer just about what is arriving, but about understanding why it carries meaning for you now. And that awareness opens the door to something deeper, leading into why it's arriving from a place you didn't expect. At first, it might feel slightly confusing. Why this? Why now? And especially why from this direction? You begin to notice that what's approaching you doesn't connect to your usual expectations, and that creates a quiet pause in your thinking. That pause is where understanding starts to form. Because when you look closer, value rarely travels in a straight line. What you gave didn't stay with the person or place you first offered it to. It moved. Through conversations, through memories, through decisions made by people you may never even meet. And somewhere along that path, it continued to carry your imprint. This is why the source feels unfamiliar. It exists outside your immediate awareness, outside the circle of people and situations you tend to track. What you're encountering now is part of a wider network, one that operates beyond direct exchange, where actions ripple outward and return through unexpected channels. And April seems to activate something within that network, not in a dramatic or overwhelming way, but in a quiet unfolding where certain connections begin to surface. It's as if pieces that have been moving independently are now finding a point of intersection, and you happen to be at the center of that moment. When you understand it this way, the idea of a stranger shifts. It no longer feels random or disconnected. It simply reflects a part of the process that was never visible to you. The origin feels distant only because it developed outside your line of sight, not because it lacks meaning or relevance. There's also something grounding in realizing this. It takes the mystery and gives it structure, a sense that what's happening follows a kind of quiet logic, not rigid, not mechanical, but organic, like something that has been growing beneath the surface and is now reaching a point where it can emerge. You may even start to sense how many things in your life have followed this pattern without you naming it. Moments where something arrived through an indirect path, yet felt precisely timed. Those moments weren't isolated. They were part of the same flow you're beginning to recognize now. And as this understanding settles in, something else begins to surface alongside it. A more personal layer, one that has less to do with where things come from, and more to do with how you receive them when they finally arrive, leading quietly into the discomfort of receiving. There's a subtle shift that happens the moment something begins to reach you. A pause, almost instinctive. It's not about the thing itself, but about how it lands inside you. And in that quiet space, something deeper starts to surface. You may notice a hesitation that doesn't fully make sense at first, a part of you that slows things down, that questions the timing, the source, even the meaning behind what's arriving. It feels small, but it carries weight, like an old reflex stepping forward before you even realize it's there. Because somewhere along the way, you learned how to rely on yourself more than anything else. You became the one who figured things out, who carried your own weight, who kept moving without waiting for support. That way of being shaped you, strengthened you, but it also created a certain distance from receiving. So when something of value begins to move toward you now, it doesn't just feel like opportunity. It touches a deeper layer, one that isn't as familiar with being on the receiving end. And that's where the discomfort begins, not loud or overwhelming, but present enough to be felt. You might find yourself trying to understand it instead of simply allowing it. Turning it over in your mind, looking for reasons, measuring it against your past experiences, as if receiving needs to be justified before it can be accepted. And yet, underneath that process, there's another awareness slowly rising. A recognition that receiving has its own kind of strength, one that doesn't come from control, but from openness. A different kind of skill, quieter, less practiced, but just as real. Scorpio, this is where the moment becomes personal. Because it's not only about what is coming toward you, it's about how much of it you're willing to let in. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to begin shifting the way you relate to value itself. There's no urgency here, only a gentle invitation to notice what happens inside you when something good gets closer. The thoughts, the feelings, the slight resistance, all of it part of a pattern that is starting to reveal itself. And as you sit with that, even briefly, something begins to soften. Not fully, not instantly, but enough to create a small opening. The kind that allows you to recognize the moment when it arrives. It might show up in a moment so ordinary you almost overlook it. A message you didn't expect. A short conversation that lingers a little longer than usual, or a small shift in your finances that feels different. Nothing overwhelming, yet something about it carries a quiet weight. You could be going about your day when an opportunity appears in a form that feels almost casual. Someone mentions something in passing, an idea surfaces again after being quiet for a while, or a door opens just enough for you to notice it. These moments don't announce themselves, they simply exist, waiting for your awareness to meet them. And this is where the pattern becomes visible. What once felt abstract begins to take shape through real-life details, through things you can see, touch, respond to. The movement you sensed earlier now has a form, even if it's still subtle and easy to dismiss. There's a tendency to wait for something bigger, something clearer, something that confirms itself without question. But what's unfolding here asks for a different kind of attention, one that recognizes the significance of small beginnings. Because often, what grows into something meaningful starts in a form that feels almost too simple to matter. April carries this energy of emergence. Things don't arrive fully formed, they unfold in layers, starting with moments that seem easy to pass by. Yet each of these moments holds a thread, and when you follow it, you begin to see where it leads. You might notice how certain things repeat themselves gently, a name appearing more than once, an idea returning with more clarity, a situation aligning just enough to catch your focus. These are the points where something begins to gather, where scattered pieces start forming a direction. And the more present you are with these moments, the clearer they become. What once felt like coincidence starts to feel intentional, as if life is placing small markers along your path, each one inviting you to step a little closer, to engage just enough to keep the flow moving. There's no need to rush ahead or force meaning onto every detail. Just noticing is enough, allowing each moment to reveal what it holds in its own time. And as that awareness deepens, something within you begins to expand naturally, leading into a space where receiving no longer feels uncertain, but quietly possible. There's a quiet shift that begins the moment you stop holding back from what's arriving. It doesn't feel dramatic, it feels subtle, like something inside you loosens just enough to let a new experience settle in. And in that space, you start to notice a different version of yourself emerging. At first, it shows up in the way you respond. You pause less, question less, and allow things to move through you with a bit more ease. What once felt unfamiliar begins to feel possible. And that small change carries more impact than it seems. Because receiving isn't only about what comes into your life, it reshapes how you see yourself within it. When you accept something of value, whether it's support, money, or opportunity, you're also acknowledging that you can hold it. That realization expands your sense of identity in a quiet but lasting way. You may notice how your perspective begins to shift. Situations that once felt out of reach now feel closer, more accessible, as if the distance between you and what you want has shortened. It's not that everything changes at once, it's that you relate to it differently. There's also a soft confidence that starts to build here. Not loud or performative, but steady, rooted in the understanding that you don't have to chase everything down the way you once did. Some things meet you halfway when you're open to receiving them. And this is where the expansion becomes real. It moves beyond a single moment or a single gain and begins to influence how you move forward. The choices you consider, the spaces you step into, the way you carry your own worth, all of it begins to stretch outward. What's opening here isn't limited to one form. It can show up as financial movement, as a shift in opportunity, or even as a new way of being that feels more aligned with who you're becoming. The form matters less than the fact that something is growing through your willingness to accept it. And as that growth continues, you begin to sense the importance of holding it in a grounded way, allowing it to settle into your everyday life where it can truly take root. It begins in small, almost unremarkable ways. You sit down to look at your finances and notice a shift in how you approach it. Less urgency, more clarity. There's a sense of space where tension used to live, and that alone changes the way you move forward. You might find yourself pausing before spending, not out of restriction, but mitoch awareness. Each decision feels more intentional, as if what you now hold carries a certain weight that deserves to be handled with care. That awareness becomes a quiet form of stability. Rest starts to take on a different meaning too. Instead of pushing through exhaustion, you allow yourself moments to reset, to breathe, to step back without feeling like you're losing momentum. And in those pauses, your energy begins to settle into something more sustainable. There's also a shift in how you organize your day. What once felt scattered begins to come together in a way that feels more aligned with where you are now. You're not trying to do everything, you're choosing what actually supports the version of you that is emerging. Even your environment may start to reflect this change. Small adjustments, a cleaner space, a more intentional routine, a different way of structuring your time. These details might seem minor, but they create a foundation that allows what you've received to stay and grow. Because holding something valuable requires a certain kind of presence. It asks you to be steady, to be aware, to recognize that how you maintain something shapes what it becomes over time. Growth doesn't only come from gaining, it comes from how you care for what's already in your hands. And as this settles into your daily life, it no longer feels like a separate moment or a temporary shift. It becomes part of your rhythm, something that supports you quietly in the background. From here, everything begins to align in a way that feels both grounded and open, leading naturally into the deeper reflection that closes this journey. There's a quiet clarity that settles in after everything you've just moved through. It doesn't arrive as a conclusion, more like a steady awareness that something real has shifted, both around you and within you. And in that awareness, things begin to feel a little simpler. What's approaching you no longer needs to be fully explained. It carries its own sense of timing, its own weight, and you can feel that now in a way that goes beyond thinking. Some things make sense through experience, not through analysis. April still feels open, like a space that hasn't finished revealing what it holds. You may sense that there's more unfolding, more aligning, even if it hasn't fully taken shape yet. And that sense of openness creates room. Room for something to arrive and room for you to meet it. The question now feels quieter than before, but also more honest. It's no longer about whether something is coming, but about how you stand when it does. There's a difference between noticing something and allowing it to stay, and you're beginning to feel that difference more clearly. You might find that your answer doesn't need to be loud or certain. It can exist as a feeling, a subtle readiness, a small internal shift that says you're willing to hold what comes your way. That kind of openness has its own kind of strength, one that builds gradually and stays. Scorpio, this is where it becomes yours. Not because of what arrives, but because of how you choose to meet it. The value, the opportunity, the support. It all finds its place differently when you allow yourself to stand in it. And maybe that's enough for now. To recognize the movement, to feel the shift, and to let yourself remain present with it as it continues to unfold. No need to rush ahead, no need to define everything, just a steady awareness that something meaningful is already in motion. If this moment resonates with you, you can stay connected to this space by liking, sharing, or subscribing, simply as a way of continuing this quiet journey together. And if you feel ready, even in the smallest way, you can express it below. I'm open to receive.